Rising anxiety and depression among kids. I just talked about a national survey on mental health yesterday, and I went off on a rant. Well, now we're talking about a youth mental health crisis. Awstin, Gregg, licensed clinical social worker, joining me now. Awstin, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so according to the numbers, number of children ages 3 through 17 who reported mental health issues rose by 26%. So that's more than 1.5 million children. How much of this is pandemic related?
You know, I think it's certainly a causative factor in these numbers, and I think it's something that we're going to continue discerning as we go forward. But part of me wonders, are these numbers representative of the conversation just becoming easier? And it's easier to say, hey, I might be struggling with this, and that might be inflating our numbers too.
It's also easy to use this as an excuse, isn't it?
You know, I think there could be a subset that over-leverages it in inappropriate settings, but I remain a little optimistic that we might be accurately describing some of these tenets, and as long as it's not used as an excuse to not do ordinary things, it could be a conversation about health.
Yeah, and Awstin, you could tell me, I mean, you could disagree with me if you want. I just talked about this yesterday because there were numbers that came out that said like 50 million Americans suffer from mental health issues. And I believe we live in an excuse-driven society. Everybody's a victim. Everybody's got something wrong with them. And guess what? We've got a diagnosis for everything because it's big money. If you're diagnosed with something, you've got to get therapy. People are getting paid. You got to get on drugs. People are getting paid. I think a lot of these numbers, this is just me, my opinion, are inflated. What do you think?
You know, they could be. And I think as we get down to the details, we'll be able to maybe look back in a few years and say, you know what, they were inflated. Or we could have the other conversation that maybe they weren't. But it's my hope that if we're having conversation about mental health and we're treating it, then we're experiencing healthier communities. I think far too long a stigma has associated itself that only unhappy, miserable, depressed people get therapy. That's just kind of not true. And so everyone can benefit from that. And so I'm hoping that whether those statistics are accurate or not, the health in our community is experienced by all of us.
Talking to Awstin, Gregg, licensed clinical social worker. Awstin, when I take a look at kids, and I have 3 boys. My youngest is 17. But when I take a look at kids, I told somebody this story the other day. I went through a community. I saw 9 kids in the front yard playing wiffle ball in the sunshine. I almost wrecked my car. You just don't see that anymore. So when we talk about depression in kids, I could see why they're depressed. I mean, they're playing video games nonstop. You don't see kids outside, getting exercise, doing stuff. Childhood obesity is through the roof. You've got a lot of kids who are inactive and who are miserable. So, I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it?
You're listing accurate statistics, and I know one of the conversations that we had is the benefits of sports and mental health previously, and that sounds rigid and solid. There's also this dynamic that perhaps as we were growing up, I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have social media. In one flip or touch of a screen, I wasn't exposed to stressors and world events, and I think that might be playing a role in it too as we look at these variables stacking onto each other.
All right, here's the big question. Are school districts prepared to handle the mental health crisis that they're going to face as these kids return to school?
That is a big question. It's a good one. Here's what I think. I think that there are committed people to addressing it. And whenever we begin pairing resources to the need, it's going to be a constantly evolving thing. The good news is that we want to address it. We're allocating resources. The unknown news is, do we have enough?
You're a licensed clinical social worker. What are the issues that you see firsthand pertaining to children and their mental health issues?
We are seeing a lot of anxiety to the transition. And so we're going from the summer lifestyle back to school. Some of that back to school is the first time back in person for some folks. And so there's the transition happening. And whenever we layer on top news, such as what happened in Uvalde and the conversations about school shooting, it really starts engaging and provoking anxiety-related behaviors.
So back in my day, that was called being nervous for the first day. Why is it anxiety today?
It might be anxiety today because we're seeing and exposed in real time to individuals participating in the same activities and unfortunately, in a tragic way, losing their life. And that could advance it to the first day jitters. Who am I going to sit next to at lunch? What are my teachers going to be like? Can I do this grade? To conversations related to, am I safe? And do we have enough tools to be safe? That might be the differentiator.
Awstin, how culpable are parents in this so-called youth mental health crisis? I mean, by not parenting, by not being there, by not talking to their kids. I mean, I think we all agree there's been a breakdown of the American family, the involvement with parents and their kids. So how much of this can get thrown back on mom and dad?
You know, mom and dad, me included, we do a noble job. I think one of the things that we can do as parents is to model these tough conversations. And sometimes we could be fell into and just not having the conversation, sweeping it under the rug, and we lose a valuable opportunity to model what it's like having an uncomfortable, hard conversation. Whenever we do those well, we equip our kiddos with a skill that they can also do while simultaneously creating trust between our relationship, and it is within that trust that we can talk about the sensitive things that we need to.
All right. Awstin, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, sir.